Director of Client Partnerships here at Pacific Cascade Legal. And today we have Tax Debt Resolution Specialist Morgan Anderson to talk about how an unsuspecting innocent spouse may be protected from a tax consequence on a jointly filed income tax return. Okay, that's a mouthful.
That is. That is.
That is a
Thank you for
mouthful.
the warm introduction, Steve.
Oh, you bet. And before we actually dive into this, can you just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe how you came to be a tax debt resolution specialist?
Yeah, it was a happy accident. Honestly, I've always loved being a problem solver. I love numbers, I love law, I love negotiating, and I had no idea when I answered an ad for an administrative assistant position that I was falling into this world. I I I fell into something that quickly became a passion. And 25 years later, I still am inspired by it every single day. I get to help people who have this problem that's been causing anxiety and sleepless nights and worry and fear. And I get to say, you know what? It's okay. I've got this. There's a solution. Let's work together. I'll get us there. Just let me take the lead. I'll grab your hand and we'll get through this labyrinth. And 25 years later, I still love what I do.
But you're perfect for this.
Oh, thank you.
You are, I mean, the word I didn't put in, and but it's true, having talked to you, we have divorces and we have family therapists, we have divorce therapists, we have child therapists. You're a tax therapist.
Yeah. Yeah, I am. I really am. And in my relationships with my clients, we get to know each other very well. And by the time I'm finished working with a client, I know all about their family. I know what they do on the weekends. I know, places they want to go on vacation. And it's because we develop this deep relationship. And at times in that relationship, I have to turn into a probation officer. I turn into a priest. People have shared things with me. I'm like, okay, well, that's taking our relationship a little far. But it's because they develop this comfort with us because we follow through with what we commit to do. We stay in constant communication. We educate our clients all along the way about every decision that we're facing. Um, and we become friends at the end of it. And I love it. I have clients who still send me Christmas cards years later. I have clients who still follow us on social media and attest to what we did for them. And it feels good. It really
Oh,
does.
oh yeah. I mean, if you don't like what you're doing, why are you doing it?
Absolutely. If it's not striking a passion for you to always put your best foot forward, maybe it's not something that you should continue committing yourself to.
That's it. That's it. Well, I'm going to ask you a pretty, I would call this a dumb question.
Yeah.
So is it easy or hard to get this innocent spouse protection?
Oh, it sounds so appealing, doesn't it?
It does.
It really does, but it is difficult. There are strict requirements that the IRS has put in place, and some states have a similar program, and they'll follow kind of the same guidelines that the federal government has put in place. But these are non-negotiable requirements, and it makes the box so small of who will qualify for it. So first and foremost, it starts with a jointly filed tax return, right? Has to start there. And the taxes determined due for the period in question were due to errors reported on the return, and the petitioner was not aware of the errors reported.
Right.
So think about like a married couple. The wife has a W-2 job, and the husband he's a contractor. Okay. And he knowingly falsely reports the financial activities of his contracting business on their tax return on the Schedule C, which is where you report self-employed income and expenses. And the IRS gets it. Something doesn't smell right. They do an audit and they find that there was an unreported $100,000 of income. Okay. Well, at that point, the wife can say, wait a minute, I didn't know about that money. I had no idea when I signed this tax return that these errors were on there. That opens the door for innocent spouse, but there's always asterisks with the IRS. So, um, the key points are jointly filed tax return. The petitioner, the person who claims innocent spouse, had no idea that there were errors reported. And it usually is regarding unreported income, incorrect or invalid deductions that they claim on there, or incorrect values given to assets for depreciation purposes. Those are like the main points that everybody should start with when they say, am I part of an innocent spouse situation?
Are the does an innocent spouse, is it just like, well, if I didn't know about it, I'm not responsible. And I'm like you, I'm thinking the W-2 worker and then the contractor. The contractor didn't report anything, but
Right.
if the W-2 were reported and they were based on the wife's income,
Hmm.
she doesn't get to get out of that just because it's a joint return.
No, no, no. It has to do with the spouse's intended activities reported, or I should say, intended non-disclosure of a true financial condition on the tax return. Now, there are some circumstances that, as I said earlier, there's always an asterisk when you're dealing with the IRS or the state tax agencies. So there's always some kind of, so these are our tried and true rules, but we'll give some consideration in these circumstances, like domestic abuse. Okay.
Yeah.
If there's a situation where there's domestic abuse in the relationship, the wife can be intimidated or the husband can be intimidated by the spouse into signing something that they know is fraudulent, but they're coerced,
Yeah.
whether it's physically, emotionally, into signing off on it. There's a basis there that the IRS and the states, if they offer a similar program, will consider. But keep in mind that just saying, oh, I was an abused spouse isn't going to be sufficient for making this claim. Okay. There has to be supporting, corroborating proof like police reports or hospital records or court records, maybe even third-party testimonials if they're far enough removed, like a neighbor who saw it happening in the backyard or something like that. So the burden of proof is always going to be on the petitioner to say, yes, I know this is outside of the standard consideration, but I want you to still consider it, and here's why. I was under duress when I signed the tax return.
Is there a time frame you have to claim it by? And I think of that because again, in a
Yeah.
divorce, it may have happened 8 years ago, and it comes out in the
Mhm.
divorce. So, are there issues of you got to sign before a certain amount, or you got to claim this before a certain amount?
Yes, it's 2 years.
Oh,
Yeah, so it has to be in a very short period of time. Now, if somebody doesn't qualify for the innocent spouse program, there's still other options to address the debt and still other ways to handle it. But with speaking to just the innocent spouse program, it is a 2-year time limit.
it would, I mean, it makes some sense. I mean, especially I didn't know. I mean,
Right.
eventually, you have to think that someone would go, well, hold it. I didn't know. I maybe suspected.
Right.
So
Well, and typically those circumstances come out through an audit, and it's 2 years from the time that the audit findings are determined. So it's not 2 years from the filing. If there's an additional tax added on, it comes from that audit, and that audit starts the 2 year clock. So it's typically within the initial notification of this tax is being assessed.
if one of the spouses, the innocent spouse, you know, they get the letter, they say you owe this because of this,
Mhm.
and they start to pay, they get on a plan. Does that negate their future ability to claim innocent spouse? Is it like,
No, because what you're really looking at is trying to create a division between spouse A and spouse B in the eyes of the IRS. So even if spouse A says, "Oh wow, I got this audit assessment and it's from my business, I'm going to start paying it." Spouse B can still say, "Okay, IRS, he may be paying it, but I want to be absolved of the responsibility for it." And usually, when this is happening, the beginnings of divorce conversations are happening, because usually there's some other circumstances when there's this type of incorrect reporting of financial activities. It really does open a door between within a trusted relationship. There's some cracks that are starting to come up. And I would caution anyone to really look at the circumstances from all aspects, not just the relationship, but the financial as well, because you want to do what you can in the time frame given to protect yourself.
you know,
Uh,
it and it doesn't mean, I guess, also that you can get relief of the responsibility, but still pay or help pay. I mean,
yeah, you
it's like
can.
I didn't know I shouldn't have to
Absolutely.
do it, but that doesn't mean we aren't going to try to do it together.
Correct. Correct.
So
Yeah.
what kind of relief is yeah is made up in innocent spouse relief? I mean, what does
There's a
relief mean?
there's a couple of different ones. The first one is just traditional. It allows for complete separation from the responsibility of paying the taxes, penalties, and interest if your spouse did something wrong on the tax return.
Right.
Equitable relief is another one. It allows the petitioner to get relief from paying taxes that the spouse understated or underpaid if it would be unfair to hold you responsible based on the facts and circumstances. So that's like, maybe you were a W-2 employee and you had extra taxes withheld just because you like socking away money for a refund every year because you use that to then fund a vacation. Well, now the IRS said, well, we're going to take your refund. And then you're like, wait a minute. No, no, no. I contributed those taxes for a very pointed reason. So I want relief from having to pay that tax bill. I want my refund back. Separation of liability relief allows a divorced or separated spouse to pay only her or his share of the understated taxes. So there's a couple of main relief options provided, but I will tell you again, it is hard to qualify for innocent spouse. So it's an option that everybody should know is out there, but it's not something that everybody qualifies for.
It sounds like, again, because thinking like a lawyer, it's some at that point, it it feels like it's something they need to get an expert to talk to. And that's someone like you.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. There's a lot of information, Google innocent spouse, and you're going to find 2,500 articles
Yeah.
kind of saying the same thing. But when you're looking at your your unique situation, you really want to sit down and talk to somebody who's experienced, who's done this hundreds of times, and say, I need a true assessment. Am I an innocent spouse? And don't hesitate to ask somebody that. They'll sit down and talk to you about the circumstances and ask you for the facts. And they'll be able to give you a pretty quick assessment whether you would qualify for it or not. As long as now I say this with an asterisk attached to it, you have to be completely transparent with the information you're giving them to make the assessment based upon.
And what I'm going to say, what sort of activities, I guess, if I came in and I said, I'm not sure what's going on with my spouse, and I'm not, I'm kind of worried.
Mhm.
Are there some kind of commonalities that you have noticed over your years and years of doing this that, you know, this person's acting this way?
Mhm.
If you see this person like not wanting to give you any, talk to you about this or that, is there some tips you can give a spouse who really doesn't know what's going on to kind of help them decide if they need to check it out more?
Oh boy, intuition is a pretty big indicator. I know that sounds very benign and overarching, but all of us that are in relationships, when we've had something happen and we separate, and you sit down and think about it, because we all do that. We all kind of beat ourselves up about why didn't I see this before? And I should have looked for signs. When you slow down and think back, hindsight's 2020. There were flags that you probably attributed to something on its own and say, oh, well, you know, I don't need to worry about that. That's just little. But when you start putting all the flags together in hindsight, you see that it was showing a pattern of concern. Slow down and really pay attention to that inner voice. Is this something I should ask about? And if you ask your spouse about, hey, how's your business going? Tell me what's happening. When we get our tax return, I'd like to sit down and walk through it. Look at your bank account records. There, as a self-employed individual, right? Your spouse receives gross income and then expenses, and the leftover money flows through to you, flows through to your household. When you get your tax return, sit down and look at it. Does it make sense? When you look at the deposits into your household bank account, does it line up with what that profit and loss on the Schedule C is showing? That's one of the easiest indicators to see if things are on the up and up. It's a pretty simple one, but trust your instincts. If you think something's wrong and you have a communicative relationship, ask questions.
Yeah.
When you get the tax return and you see that the Schedule C, the business income and expense and the net profit that flows through that's considered as income to the household, ask your partner how it may differ from what you're seeing in the bank account, and just say, I'm just looking out for us as a household. I want to make sure that we have no problems. So I just want to make sure that everything is being reported properly and accurately.
Before we go, and we're kind of running out of time, but I really want to ask this one last question, and it is if you see these, or if you have these suspicions and you begin to wonder, um, and you look and you go, hold it. husband, why did we not put your W-2 on and we put mine on? I mean, that kind of stuff, you actually can see stuff. At some point, you can't really fall back, I would imagine, on the innocent spouse rule because you're, are you losing your innocence?
Well, and at that point, you have to have the confidence to say, I'm concerned about us filing jointly then if you are making a decision to not include X, Y, and Z. You can always file your tax return as married filing separate, and that creates division between the two parties in a relationship. It may cause some other uncomfortable things that you need to deal with, but you have a right to ask to separate when you file a tax return. But know that when you do that, when you make that move, you can't then say 2 years later, oh, we're going to go back to married filing joint. Once you separate, you separate. The other thing is you're taxed at a higher rate if you file married filing separately, you lose some of that benefit of filing jointly with somebody. So the best thing is to try to coerce them to report everything accurately. Of course, in an abusive situation, tread lightly, protect yourself, speak with your attorney about what's going on. If you're at that position, and if not, know that there is a way to claim innocent spouse if you're positioning yourself to make a break.
Wow. Thank you. Wow.
Mhm.
I did not know. I have to say, I did not know that if married couples who have been filing joint returns file separately, they can never go back and file joint
Yeah,
returns.
it's because you're making a strategy decision, right?
Yeah.
And there's a reason why you're saying, I don't want to file jointly. We're getting a benefit to not do so. Yeah, you're making a declaration.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Unfortunately, we are out of time, Morgan. I want to
Ah,
thank you so much for being here today to talking about how the innocent spouse relief works, what you can do, what you can do to protect yourself, and doing it in a way that is understandable, and even to someone like me. And you know, that's a tough haul to do, but it was very, very good. Thank you so much.
yeah. Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to come on and talk about a topic that seems appealing and maybe does apply to some people who are listening. It's important that you have a basic understanding of these concepts if it seems like something that would be good for you and to address a tax situation that you're dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And everyone else, thank you for joining us today. If anyone has any further questions on today's topic, you can post it here. We can get you connected with Morgan, or you can contact Morgan directly. Morgan, you want to talk a little bit about how they would contact you?
Sure. You can look me up online, Morgan Q Anderson. That Q, that middle initial is a pretty strong identifier. You've got the right person. But my company's name is Golden Lion Tax Solutions. We're on social media. We've got a great website. You can find my direct contact information on the website. You can send me a message through social media. I want to help give anybody some insight into what they're facing if they have a tax issue.
Yeah, I love that. So, everyone today who joined us, until next time, stay safe, stay happy, and be well.